Kare Shalom, welcome to our watercolor journey. Today we're going to have a look at 3 different techniques to bring light into your painting. And all 3 of them are interesting and easy to use. The materials used are listed in the description below. The paper is on a Perspex board and it is at a slight angle, and you can spray it wet with the spray bottle and then spread the water with the brush, the Hake, or you can just use the Hake with a lot of water directly. Now it needs to be at an angle because you want your background paints to flow into each other. So we're starting at the top with the French Ultramarine, and then we're going to go to a little bit of Cobalt blue. And you don't have to worry too much about painting it exactly because it is going to flow into each other. The cobalt gives a little bit of a cooler color there, and when you add the red, the transparent red, then it gives you the beautiful sunset type of colors. And don't worry, also the water is flowing right down to the bottom. You are going to use that, so don't worry too much about it for the moment. From the red, we are going to go to the Aureolin, and by mixing the colors on the paper, you can see that it gives you beautifully natural from blue to purple to orange and then to the yellow at the bottom. If there's too much water, you can always clear it up with a paper towel or with a thirsty brush. That would also help. Don't let the water lie there for too long though, because it may lift your tape at the bottom and then it will seep underneath and ruin the sides of your painting or the edges. You won't have such crisp edges if you let it seep underneath the tape. So here Heinrich used a flat brush to make the stalks. You can use a normal rigger or anything like that with a thin, fairly thin tip, but the flat brush gives it a different look. So you mix the sepia and then you can add the dark mix at the top right is a mixture of French ultramarine and sepia, and that gives you a nice dark brown. So there was an attempt to make a little sun there by just dipping out the paint, but later on you will see that it got obscured by the rest of the stalks in the front, so don't worry too much about that if you don't get it right immediately. Add a little bit more yellow there just to give it more of a warmer glow, and then you use the brush to add thin strokes of brown. It will spread all the time because your background is really wet, but it doesn't matter. You are going to, when it's dry, you are going to add your next layer. Dip in a few blobs of darker color here and there just to help with shadows, to create the light versus dark situation that you need there. So you can add some of the dark mixture, the French ultramarine and sepia mixture, a touch of blue here and there just to harmonize with the sky. And because the grasses are all growing upright or fairly upright, you will use upright strokes from top to bottom or from bottom to top. And vary the strokes a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, because they don't grow like, straight up. They have different angles. Now here's our first light technique. You use a brush that is wet, and you just draw lines through the wet paint with it. It is fairly faint on the paper here, but you can see everywhere where he draws with the clean brush, the light lines come through. As the paint gets a little bit drier, you can see that the lighter strokes or the dry brush strokes are clearer. So you can let the painting dry now thoroughly. And now we are going to do the stalks with a much darker mixture so that they can stand out a little bit against your very faint background. Now here again, you can just tip of the brush and draw your stalks in. Use a variation of the French Ultramarine mix and the Sepia to give you different tones of the brown that you will use here. The darker mix to give you the shadows, and take note that these are not solid lines. They are broken because the brokenness of the line also gives you the illusion of light shining on it. Nothing here needs to be very precise. It is just an illusion of these grass stalks or grain stalks growing, and they're right in your line of sight. So some of them will have a little bit more detail, others will have less detail. You can see now when you look at where the white lines were drawn with the clean brush, that it gives a little bit of light extra into your painting. And then if you draw the stalk next to that white line, it forms a nice contrast. You can use the side of the brush to make tri-brush strokes, just to give a little bit more foliage at the bottom, to make it a little bit denser. The touches of blue there again is to enhance the shadows, but also to bring harmony with the background. Add a little bit more of the yellow, and now there's already been blue on the brush, so if you add the yellow it gives it a nice greenish tint. So just a little bit of green there at the bottom shining through. fuzz the background ones out with your finger a little bit. That would also give you the illusion of distance and depth. Now you're building the colors up on these ones because you are going to just now use the next technique to create light. And that is to use your credit card or a cut up store card to push the paint out of the way. And that is how you bring light. Now if you didn't add enough paint to each of those little seed pods, then you won't be able to do that. So that is why the paint was built up so much, so that you can push it out and draw in some light into the grass pods. Right, then let them dry again. And now we're doing the bokeh effect. We use two different brushes, a smaller one, a smaller Princeton stencil brush, and a larger one. So you wet the brush, and then wherever you want to lift the paint, you draw quick circles on the paper. Don't press too hard, you really don't need to. It lifts fairly easily. And then you dab with a paper towel where you made your circle. Make sure that you rinse the brush every single time, because otherwise you would transfer paint from one area to another, especially if you work on a dark area and you go to a lighter area. Then that might ruin your painting. So the circles at the top are fairly small, and that's where we use the smaller stencil brush. And as you go further down, you are also going to make the circles a little bit bigger. Now they can touch, they can overlap, they can be in little groups. You can make the circles whichever way you want. The idea is to create the illusion of light shining through these stalks. So here and there at the top you can make larger circles just for variation, but most of the larger circles will be at the bottom. And your circles do not have to be precisely round. They can be a little bit off sometimes. It's your painting. Doesn't really matter as long as the illusion of the light is there. So we looked at drawing lines on the background with a clean wet brush, or damp brush rather. And we looked at using the credit card, cut up store card, to push the paint away on the stalks to make some white lines there or lighter lines there. And then the last technique is to use the stencil brush to make the bokeh. Bokeh is a difficult thing sometimes. It becomes mesmerizing, and sometimes you feel you want to just keep going. Be careful not to make too many circles. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe and leave us a comment. And we hope to see you again soon. Vaya con Dios.